Alex, welcome into the game. I hope all is well, man.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. The content is beginning to flow. It's been a long off season, as you would imagine, here in T-Town.
Oh yeah, we're going to turn the spigot on, and it's going to get going so much that I don't think we're going to be able to consume it all. But you talk to people around town, and it's a lot of excitement just to get ready for a football game and something to happen after months and months of chewing on what happened up in Santa Barbara back in January.
Absolutely, 100%. And we were talking yesterday with your colleague, Chris Lowe, who was in Tuscaloosa. And, one of the things that he kind of gave us some insight, he said, inside that building, they're not very pleased with all this Clemson has pulled up side by side, or even some that say that they went past Alabama a little bit. They don't like that narrative inside that building here in T-Town.
No, I don't think so. And you really, if you listen to players even publicly, you can sort of pick up on that. I think that's where a lot of the conversation at media days was coming from. And even I remember standing next to Dylan Moses when he was talking about it and said, look, you respect Clemson, but he was saying nobody's done what Alabama's done these last 10 years, and it's hard to argue that. Well, I think you could argue right now that Clemson might be a little bit ahead of Alabama because they won the national championship this past year. Over the long haul, I think you have to tip your cap to what Nick Saban has done, and Clemson, we'll see if they can catch up to that. I understand that part of it from the Alabama perspective, and I think they're going to sort of use that as fuel to the fire, that they've got something to prove with so many people in public saying that, they've been surpassed.
Well, and that's perfect for Nick Saban. I mean, back in his privacy of his office, he's clapping, because he loves this inner motivation. He's got to love it, because he'll convince. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when Ole Miss did not even say one word, and he said that someone silently has your number. And I'm going, Nick Saban, you've just pulled off a masterful psychology on these poor players that Ole Miss didn't say anything, but he had them convinced that they were talking.
Oh, he's absolutely the master of manipulation when it comes. I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, they've been the best team in the SEC for like 10 years now, and you've got to figure out a way week in and week out to keep your team motivated, and he's wonderful at doing that. And, him and Scott Cochran, I just picture them, doctoring posters and trying to come up with, quotes that might not be real quotes, but they really find a way to push it. And you're right, this right now is his bread and butter, because he doesn't have to say anything really. And he doesn't have to, split hairs and try to make something out of nothing. It's there for Alabama players. If they want to have motivation from what other people are saying, Nick doesn't have to really open his mouth. He just has to point to it and say, look, this is what they're saying. If that doesn't upset you, it really shouldn't. Let's go get to work.
You had a chance to sit down with some of these defensive backs on Media Day this past Saturday and talk about some of these wide receivers. I'm curious. I love the article. I love the idea. I think it's good to be able to get these guys to describe their opposing teammates that they go up against. And I just – you look at the different quotes. I mean, I guess maybe the one that you heard the most, or maybe the one that grabbed your attention, what was it?
Oh, it's absolutely – talking to Xavier McKinney. And you're right, nobody's going to know those wide receivers more than a guy who goes against them every single day. It wasn't, to me, how impressed he was with Jerry Jeudy's skill or how fast Henry Ruggs and Jalen Waddle was. It was when I got to Devonta Smith and he said, wait a second, this guy is wildly underrated. People are sleeping on him, and he can do all of those things that those other guys can do. And you know what? I think people do need to remember that he pulled his hamstring about halfway through last season. It wasn't really the same. He's still that same receiver who caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Georgia in the national championship. He still has that kind of promise as a talent, and I think a healthy Devonta Smith only makes this receiving core that much more dangerous. It really is a thing where if you're a defensive coordinator, I don't really know what you do to try to stop it. They lose, obviously, a tight end from last year, but if you have all four of those receivers healthy, they're going to stretch the field in a major way.
Well, I had an NFL draft evaluator that we love to respect, and I know he does some work down with ESPN down in New Orleans, Mike Detillier, earlier. And I said, take Jerry Jeudy off the board. Who's the second best wide receiver on this receiving unit? And he literally went right there where you just said. He said, I'll take Devonta Smith.
I'm a little surprised by that too, because it doesn't seem to be the prevailing opinion when you look at what the national landscape says. And we are sort of splitting hairs here. Let's be a little bit honest. Jalen Waddle is a terrific football player, and Henry Ruggs, what he can do, his leaping ability, his speed, that one-handed pass catch he made against LSU last year, he is terrific athletically. I just think people overlook Devontae a little bit because he doesn't quite show the same kind of flash. But he is the complete package at receiver. And it's really interesting because this isn't, in the past with a Julio Jones, you look for the overwhelming physical attributes. And this group is not that, but they're still effective in their own way. And when you've got a guy like Tua Tagovailoa as the trigger man with that and quick decisions he's able to make, it really is something dangerous.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun when you look at this offense. But how much does the wide receivers, as you're writing about this, you're thinking about every time we talk about those wide receivers, but the running lanes that's going to be available for Harris, Robinson, and Trey Sanders and company when they decide to hand the football off?
Oh, man. I mean, when they go RPO and you're a linebacker and you're trying to figure out, do I need to drop back and try to clog these passing lanes, or do I need to creep forward and account for a Najee Harris or Brian Robinson? I mean, what are you supposed to do with that? Because if Najee gets a full head of steam, he's going to bowl you over. It really is an effective offense overall. I think the question is, how is the offensive line going to come together? There's a lot of talent there. There's no reason to think it won't be solid. And if they are, you're right, the yards per carry for this group should be really strong at the running back position. It really is one hand washing the other when it comes to that. And it's funny because only a few years ago, this wide receiver core looked completely different. It was Calvin Ridley and everybody else, and there wasn't the same balance. And now you could almost argue that while this is always going to be an offense that fundamentally wants to run the football, their ability to pass the football really opens things up for the running game.
Biggest takeaway from Pete Golding inside that room? I'm just curious what you heard from the defensive coordinator here. New one in Tuscaloosa, Pete Golding.
I mean, super impressed. I really came away from his brief time talking to us on Saturday impressed at how much knowledge he has, but also about how frank he was with, his own journey to this point and what this defense needs to do. I think there's a lot of attitude on the defensive side of the ball, and I use that in a good way, whether you're talking about what Dylan Moses said coming out of media days, whether you're talking about what you heard from players these past few days, or with it starts at the top with a Pete Golding. There's a lot of attitude that says, hey, what happened last year is not what we're about. We need to have a standard. And I think in a young guy in Pete Golding, you're starting to see why Nick Saban entrusted him with, very little experience on the resume, relatively speaking, to run his defense. There's a lot to like there, and I think it starts with the knowledge, but also with the attitude and the frankness and his ability. I think he's going to have to get through to players about the job that needs to be done this year.
Alex, a lot of different things. I guess we can start making up stories. What's going to prevent this team? I mean, is there anything that you see in the first week of practice that would prevent Alabama from getting to New Orleans?
No, I mean, I don't really see it. I think it's going to come down to Alabama and Georgia again in an SEC championship game to see, in all likelihood, who would make the playoff, assuming both aren't in a position to do that. I just don't see the schedule as being a really big encumbrance as opposed to maybe in years past. If LSU maybe grows an offense like they're saying they will with Joe Brady, there maybe things change. But I really like where Alabama is overall. There maybe are some depth issues when you start to look at the defensive side of the football, maybe tight end, what are they going to do there? But, again, when you've got the quarterback, when you've got the receivers they have, and I really like the pieces they have on defense with Dylan Moses, Xavier McKinney, Patrick Surtain, it's all right there for Alabama. So assuming there's not a huge health issue and assuming that Nick Saban can keep those guys motivated like we've talked about, whether sometimes that's fabricated or not, if that happens, I don't really see anything standing in their way. I think Alabama should be a prohibitive favorite to come out of the SEC West.
Let's go back to Xavier McKinney, the guy that you talked to. I think he's going to take that next step in that secondary. I just see something blossoming into a next superstar back there as well.
I'll be honest with you, I think he took the next step last year, and I think
Sure.
a lot of people didn't notice it. I think he was the better safety compared to Deontay Thompson, and I had a scout tell me that point blank that, look, this guy's all-around game is a little bit better in the way he can come into the box and really make plays, almost functioning as a linebacker there. I really think what Alabama has, well, it is hard to replace the sheer talent of a Deontay Thompson or a Quinnen Williams or an Isaiah Bubbs for that matter. I think what they have coming back, the way the coaching staff seems to have stabilized a little bit, Holding being the sole defense coordinator, Salisbury coming back, I think what they have overall, a healthy Terrell Lewis, I think everything really sets up nicely for this group, and I think McKinney on the back end is going to be a guy who can bring the big hitting ability and the leadership for a secondary that I think should make significant improvements from a year ago.
Alex, just a couple of quick SEC questions. What are you expecting from Auburn in 2019?
If they have everything starts with if they have a quarterback, because I think what they have around the quarterback position is good. I think their offensive line, Prince Tega and those guys are good. I think wide receiver, assuming some of those guys can get healthy. Seth Williams is really good. Boobie Whitlow, a running back, all really good pieces. And the defensive side of the ball with guys they got back like Derek Brown, everything there is right there for the taking. But when you have two freshman quarterbacks that you're choosing from in Bo Nix and Joey Gatewood, that's a difficult thing to do. Throw on top of that the fact that you have a head coach who's on the hot seat and a place in Auburn that when things go bad, they go bad really quickly. I think if they get really better than expected quarterback play and one of those guys can play beyond their years, they could suddenly become a team we're really talking about contending in the SEC. If they don't, I think it goes bad in a hurry, and I think Gus Malzahn might be looking for other employment. It really does, in my mind, come down to the quarterback position, and maybe there's something that's a little bit perfect about that because, look, for years and years we were talking about Gus Malzahn being the quarterback whisperer with Cam Newton and Nick Marshall, and I think if he wants to retain his job, he's got to do that again because if he does, like I said, I think they're in a good spot. It remains to be seen who that guy will be and how they'll perform come Saturday.
LSU, you buying?
I'm really torn on LSU. I am because I think Grant Delpit, I think Ed Orgeron was right immediately. I think he might be the best defensive player in the country. And getting Chase on back at outside linebacker, rushing the quarterback, I think they're going to be really good on defense. And I think they have all the pieces and a veteran quarterback in Joe Burrow. There's a lot there to like, but it requires them taking that next step offensively. It requires Orgeron listening to a guy like Joe Brady who has a lot of good ideas and really bringing a 21st century spread offense to Baton Rouge finally. If that happens, they're really dangerous, and maybe they're in a position to challenge Alabama to come out of the West. If it doesn't, I think they're going to be sort of that second-tier team, really good but not great. I want to see if they really are changing the offense because I think if they are, the whole dynamic changes. I'm just really hesitant because I'm sure a lot like you, we've heard this song and dance before, and we don't know whether or not to believe it.
Alex S_ESPN, Alex S_ESPN, reporter covering college sports for ESPN, focusing in on the SEC and even a closer focus on the University of Alabama. Go read his work there, ESPN.com. If you'll find the college football tab, you'll find the great article about Alabama's receivers being super fast and all the descriptions there. Alex, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the show here in Tuscaloosa. I hope you have a great day.
All right, you too. My pleasure.